Hello, everyone. Bill and I want to thank Colson Oil and our longtime friends, Beth and Mike Colson, for sponsoring this series. And thanks, as always, to Stephanie and the Clinton Presidential Center. You are in for a treat joining the conversation this evening because you're going to get a chance to hear, unvarnished, our friend, Capricia Marshall. Look, we know this is a tumultuous time for our country, but one of the things that fills me with hope is seeing the way people are stepping up to try to help solve the problems that we face, both immediate and long term. And back in March, when the schools in Pulaski County closed because of the pandemic, the Clinton Foundation immediately teamed up with World Central Kitchen, the City of Little Rock, and other local and community organizations to provide meals to students, families, and anyone else who was in need. I'm so proud of that because the Clinton Presidential Center became the operations headquarters, with meals being prepared in the kitchens, packaged in the Great Hall, and then sorted for delivery in the lobby. And as of this week, the Pulaski County Meals Program in Little Rock has distributed more than 450,000 meals. I want to thank everyone who has played a part in this really important effort, which will continue through the summer. And now for the reason why we're here, and that's because you're going to get to meet, if you don't already know her, Capricia. I'll never forget the first trip that she and I took together back in 1991. She had joined Bill's campaign after watching him give a speech on television, and she spent months rounding up convention delegates in Ohio. During that time, it became absolutely clear that she had a real gift for events and logistics. So first, she joined my advance team, and I was scheduled to fly to Shreveport, where Capricia was going to meet me on the tarmac at the airport and then proceed to our events. She arrived in plenty of time. She was the first person there. In fact, she soon realized she was the only person there. And finally, someone asked her what she was doing, and she explained she was waiting to meet the First Lady of Arkansas, and that's how she learned that there were two airports in Shreveport, and she was at the wrong one. But being the totally creative and very flexible person that she is, she quickly made up for that. And we had such a great time during that campaign. We talked about everything from growing up in the Midwest to going to law school. I learned she was a first-generation American. Her mother was from Mexico. Her father was a Croatian refugee from Tito's Yugoslavia. Eventually, Capricia and I would wind up traveling the world together. She's a great person to travel with because for the rest of her life, she will always double check the airport before she leaves to get there. And when I became Secretary of State, knowing her superb service during 8 years of the Clinton administration, there was no doubt in my mind she was the best person for the job of Chief of Protocol for our nation. I had already witnessed her grace under pressure, her intelligence, her attention to detail firsthand in the campaign, in the White House, and I knew there was no one better suited to represent the United States on the global stage. And if you want to know how that turned out, well, have I got a book recommendation for you. You're going to love this book and all of the great stories, but more than that, really a lot of great advice about how to apply principles of diplomacy and protocol to business, to your social activities. And really, in today's world, we've got to figure out how we're going to get along better with people we don't agree with. So the book is filled with remarkable stories about Capricia's life and her run-ins with royals, presidents, and rock stars. But what sets this book apart is that each story contains practical advice for everyone, but I think especially women, on how to put your best foot forward, believe in yourself, and have the courage to take risks. So it's going to be a great read, and I've got somebody here who knows a little bit about diplomacy and about negotiating in tough situations, and who also got to know Capricia all those years ago. So take it away, Bill.
Thanks. Capricia, I was just thinking how different our lives would have been if you and your dad had never watched that film on my New Covenant speech back in 1991. How lucky I was, how lucky Hillary was, our whole family, our whole administration. Thanks for everything you've done. And I'll never forget, among other things, that you even organized our farewell event with Fleetwood Mac. You got them back together when they didn't want to. And you got the campaign bus on the south lawn of the White House. So that's what I want everybody to know. If you need something done, ask Capricia. She will figure out how to get it done. She's also a wonderful person. I love her husband. I love her son. Our families have been friends now forever. Her service is a great gift, and her book is a great gift. So thanks to Mike and Beth for making it possible. Thanks, Stephanie, for making this event happen. And take it away, Capricia. You're the best.
It is such an immense pleasure to be here with you. I'm going to pretend that I'm in that wonderful town of Little Rock that I fell in love with almost 30 years ago, even though we are here virtually. It's terrific to be a part of this Bridge Builders series. And let me just say to those who really don't know Stephanie, she is a superwoman. Her talent, her finesse, her creativity has made the Clinton Foundation world renowned. And on top of that, she is an amazing wife and mother, raising 3 glorious young women today, setting them on a path, I am sure, to great success. And on top of all of that, she is my fabulous, cherished friend. Can you believe it's been almost 30 years, Stephanie, and we're only 29? I don't understand the math there.
Hard to believe that we were teenagers when we started on that campaign in 1991.
It's truly really hard.
Wow.
The video from the 2 of them, it just, it makes me think back to those beginning days, Stephanie. We were so very lucky to have had them at the nascent stages of our career. 2 people, the greatest public servants of our country, no, the world, President and Secretary Clinton. They invested in us. They are true bridge builders. They saw in us great possibility. And their belief in the power and the potential of every human changes lives. I know that they changed mine. I will be grateful to them forever.
Well, thank you, Capricia. I'd like to start talking about your wonderful parents, who you write so eloquently about in your book. And as the Clintons mentioned, they were both immigrants from different countries. Tell us a little bit about them, their backgrounds, and perhaps some of the powerful lessons that they instilled in you to contribute to your success advising some of our world's most influential leaders.
It just made my heart swell to hear President Clinton and Secretary Clinton mention them. You know, I grew up in a home that was like the UN. There were many languages spoken, many traditions that were revered, and so many different types of food that were served. It instilled in me this curiosity of culture. I wanted to celebrate culture. But during the time when I was growing up, my father and mother were also discriminated against. My father had a really thick accent, Capricia, he would say. And people would call him a dumb DP, a displaced person. And my mother wasn't what you would call the creamiest of colors. And so I saw a bit of that pain on their faces. And it instilled in me the desire to celebrate the differences, to really shine a spotlight on why knowing and why learning about someone else's culture and tradition would benefit me It created those bridges of understanding. And so forever, I will be grateful to those beginnings in my life, to my two wonderful immigrant parents.
Well, another thing you talk about in the book is the very first time that your father, Frank, met President Clinton. Can you tell us a little bit about that encounter?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Let me take you inside the White House, into the diplomatic reception room, which is on the ground floor of the White House. I'm standing there for a meet and greet, as we would call that, with the president as he was exiting out to his motorcade. He was always so wonderful and meeting with all of our parents, both of them. My family was coming into the White House in droves all the time. On this occasion, though, my father wanted to present the president with socks that his mother had knitted specially for him, and also a bottle of wine, my father's own home brew, that he wanted to present. So while he was getting ready to hand the bottle of wine over, it slipped and fell and broke on the diplomatic reception room rug. And it was red wine. I stopped. My heart just completely stopped. My poor father he was shocked. He couldn't move. But what does the president do? He walks on over to my dad, puts his arm around him. He says, "Hey, Frank, I'm just so sad I'm not going to get some of that wine. Do you think you might have another bottle you can send me?" I was just in awe. I mean, that's leadership. That's how he, in that moment, knew how my father felt, and just in an instant, in a blink, made him feel so much better. The empathy that he has for others, it's a lesson that I learned and I hold true to today.
Thank you. And the connection, I mean, always making you feel like you're the only person in the room.
Always.
It really is something so special about President Clinton. So you heard Secretary Clinton, she talked about the two of you traveling the world together, but in the White House, as social secretary and in your roles there, you also had the opportunity to accompany President Clinton on some of his most important foreign trips. And you also really, in your role as social secretary, helped them set the table for critical conversations on diplomacy. Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned about diplomacy from President Clinton? And I'd also love to hear you talk a little bit about your first foreign trip with President Clinton and maybe one of your most memorable state visits at the Clinton White House.
Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a roast, isn't it, Stephanie? Because you know some of these stories.
I've forgotten them all.
Well, I was wide-eyed about having the opportunity to work in the White House for both Secretary Clinton, then of course First Lady Hillary Clinton, and President Clinton. Every moment was so special. Every moment was a learning moment. Our first trip was extraordinary. We went to Japan, and I remember on this trip that we landed, and as the Clintons always do, they have a very packed schedule. I was thoroughly exhausted, a little bit of jet lag, and I had my room was always right next door to their suite. And I regrettably drank a little green tea, so I couldn't get to sleep. But finally, I did. I fell asleep and I was zonked out. But suddenly I started hearing some commotion in my room. And I was wondering what's going on. And maybe I'm just daydreaming or something like that. And I looked up and there's a whole group of people in my room with Bruce Lindsay seated at the end of my bed. And I looked up and I said, well, Bruce, what's going on? What's going on? He said, "Oh, we didn't want to bother Hillary and we needed to do a little speech prep. So we thought we'd come into your room. It's okay, right?" Well, I knew from that moment on that this was going to be a roller coaster of a ride. I just turned right over and fell right back to sleep. "Sure, Bruce, go ahead." Oh my goodness. But the one of the greatest events that I helped in planning was the 50th anniversary of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was an extraordinary event because we were punctuating this passing of time of this great alliance, but it was also a tense time with the alliance because we had the Kosovo conflict to worry about. Hand in hand with then First Lady Hillary Clinton, worked on every detail of that engagement. And she knew that the tone of the event had to be somber, and yet we still had to honor this moment and honor these leaders, and in particular those who were going to be joining this alliance. We had to make them feel welcomed. And so from the place in which we held it, we created this structure on the South Lawn that looked like an extension of the White House, to the military timing of the event, to the food that we served, down to the table that we created, both on the first evening and on the second evening. The first evening, it was in a moon shape. And the reason why Hillary chose a moon-shaped table was so that every leader was able to see the other. She understood the importance of parity and putting all of the leaders on the same level playing field. The second evening, we created one that had the leaders it's more like a comb, if you will. We started off as an E, but then it expanded because so many more leaders kept accepting. And when we had the head table at the top, and then all of the other leaders down the side. So again, they were able to have a good view of those who were leading this effort.
So listening to you talk about all those logistics and details, I would love for you to talk about how some of those things and those little details actually inform diplomacy and can actually help make or break a meeting. And then talk a little bit about being around President Clinton. You were in the room when a lot of other people weren't. Can you tell us about what you observed and anything you learned from him about his diplomatic skill set?
Oh my goodness, there's so much that I learned from President Clinton throughout the years, but there was one very special moment with President Clinton when it was actually the final day of his administration, and one that is, again, seared into my memory forever. The Clintons descended the grand staircase for the final time together, and Charlie Corrado, who's the head of the military band, was playing one of their favorite songs, It Had to Be You. And President Clinton grabbed Mrs. Clinton and twirled her around in the grand foyer, and they sort of went from room to room, just remembering all of the wonderful events and moments that they had shared together in those various rooms. I had to go and collect them because President-elect George Bush and Mrs. Bush's motorcade was arriving. And so I told them it's time now to come. And at that moment then, Vice President Al Gore and Mrs. Gore arrived. And as you recall, the election was a tense one. It was close. There were some still tense feelings, bitter feelings about that election, but he was there, standing dutifully. I went to the North Portico door and greeted the president-elect and introduced, of course, made those introductions to the President and Mrs. Clinton, and then they escorted them into the Blue Room, where you have just this brief coffee. It's not a long ceremony. It's intended to be just a brief social occasion, and very few people are there. Myself and John Podesta, I believe, was there, and that was it from White House staff. Everyone else at this point has left the White House. So the time has now come for them to board the motorcade to head to Capitol Hill for the swearing in. I begin to assist everyone to get into the motorcade, and then I turn to the president and the president-elect. I said, sirs, it is time for us now to go. They put on their coats, and at that moment, President Clinton grabbed the shoulders of President-elect Bush, sort of straightened up his coat, fixed it up a bit, and he said, come on, let's go do this. And President-elect Bush didn't say a word, but looked at him, and with his eyes, seemed as though he was saying, don't worry, I've got this. And that was the transition of power. Two very different philosophies of how we govern our country exchanged from one hand to the other, without bloodshed, without a gunshot. That is a profound moment that I will keep forever.
Wow. And you know, from where I sit here at the foundation, it's been so really amazing to watch the very special friendship between bitter rivals from a presidential campaign. President Clinton and President Bush 41, as you know, formed a very, very special relationship. And President Clinton and President Bush 43 as well have a really close relationship. And as you know, we've run this wonderful program together, this nonpartisan program, the Presidential Leadership Scholars. And I think many of them are tuning in tonight to listen into our conversation as well. I'm going to now make a little, go to a little bit of a lighter moment. I want you to talk a little bit about your job as White House Social Secretary, because there's a few differences between being the Social Secretary and the Chief of Protocol. So at the White House, you planned and executed really flawlessly state visits, historic summits like we just talked about, but you also worked alongside then First Lady Hillary Clinton to curate many other unique experiences, such as the millennial evenings, concert series in performance featuring all types of artists from all genres of music, Razorback basketball parties, which I remember very fondly, and massive picnics on the South Lawn with everything from Ferris wheels to tilt-a-whirls to all kinds of different kind of carnival rides and really fun things. I'd like you to tell us, in your words, what were some of the most fun, interesting, different types of events that you put together, and some other experiences as Social Secretary?
Well, planning all of those events gave me great joy, because it was the details of putting each and every event together, preparing, making sure that our guests, the guests of the Clintons, had understood, why are we having this event during the Millennial Series? Why are we exchanging these ideas with you? Why did we invite this speaker in to share their thoughts and ideas with you, from Elie Wiesel to so many other artists who were profound speakers and taught us lessons as we moved from one century to the next. It was such an extraordinary time to be in the White House as we made that crossing of time. And then First Lady Hillary Clinton really wanted to punctuate that moment with a series of events that would teach people various lessons. And I just loved being a part of creating the details that would be conveyed to the various people who could attend them. But I have to say that one of my favorite events to plan were the birthday parties of the First Lady, of Hillary Clinton's. We love to surprise her. It was hard to do, super hard to do. You know, she worked really hard, and we wanted to give her one night that she didn't have to think about the details. So on the very first one, and her birthday does land right around Halloween. Right. We decided to make it a Halloween party, and we turned all the lights off in the White House. We had a big glowing pumpkin at the North Portico door, and she wondered, what is going on? We ordered her in. We brought her finally up to the second floor. We had selected her costume, which was Dolly Madison. We know, one of her favorite first ladies, with the wig, and the president dressed as well as President Madison, and Chelsea in costume as well. And as they descended the staircase, there were all of her friends dressed up in fun costumes for an evening that was going to just give her a night to relax and laugh. And we did just that.
Well, I just thought it was so special how the Clintons truly wanted all of their friends, people from Arkansas. I think they really wanted to make the White House a home for Chelsea, for their family, and for their staff. I mean, you think about all the phenomenal picnics and, like I said, the Razorback parties. Gosh, what a special time. And as I said, you were the person behind the scenes working with people like Ann Stock and Ann McCoy and Margaret Willock and all these wonderful people from Arkansas to
some of my favorites. And working on
amazing.
Also, Stephanie, you know, some of the other projects that we worked on was the, redecoration of the White House with Kathy Hockersmith.
Right.
She was extraordinary at bringing her talents into the White House now that will be a part of that building forevermore.
And Sheila Bronfman bringing all the Arkansas travelers up for all the various events. Really very, very special memories. That's right. I'm going to transition now. We've talked a little bit about the Social Secretary role and your flawless execution of many events, fun, historic, grand, and small. And again, I want to really focus on the flawless execution. And I'm going to transition now by showing a quick little video clip, and then I'm going to ask you to tell us more about that.
Wow, Don't take that. Don't take that.
Okay, tell us what that was, what happened, and oh my gosh, must be in really good shape. Did you all see the way she just popped right up? I think she had on like 6-inch Manolos under that dress. Talk about that, Patricia.
Stephanie, this is a roast. Okay, so this is an evening where we are honoring President Calderon of Mexico and Mrs.
And you are the chief of protocol now. You are the ambassador to the United States of America.
That's right. Yes, I am. In that lovely pink gown with my skinny Manolo heels.
And President and Mrs. Obama standing right behind you.
Yes, they are. And so on the duty of the chief of protocol these evenings is to lead the president and the first lady out the north portico door, and then to step to the left to await the arrival of the motorcade of our visiting dignitary. And so as I made my way to the left, my skinny Manolo heel got stuck in a marble divot. And as you saw, down I went. Well, I do a little P90X, and so I've got a little strength in the core, so I didn't completely flop over, thank goodness, face forward. I was able to pull myself back up, and you saw the president and Mrs. Obama reach for me and yell to the press corps where they are just flashing.
Yeah.
Saying, don't take that picture. Well, of course they took the picture, and I kept thinking to myself, now what do I do? Now what do I do? Well, you carry on with the duty at hand. And as you saw, I descended the stairs, greeted the president, and introduced the president, President Calderon and Mrs. Zavala to President Obama, Mrs. Obama. And as we entered then the White House, I just collapsed. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. But let me tell you, on the next visit then, which was for President Lee Moon-bak of Korea, I again stood in front of the president and Mrs. Obama, led them out the north portico door. And as I was walking out, President Obama in the back of my ear whispered, "Will she stay up or will she go down?"
Okay.
Oh, thank goodness I stayed up.
Well, I was very impressed, like I said, with your ability to just pop back up and shake it off and act like nothing had ever happened. But you're famous for that, Capricia. You are a master. Let's transition a little bit. I want to talk about your book. I want you to talk to us a little bit, because most people can't even imagine that tips that you share in your book about how you navigate important international meetings like the G20 or the NATO summit you referenced earlier, how these tips of protocol can be implemented into your daily lives. Talk about that, and talk about how protocol can be beneficial just to any ordinary person.
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked me that question, Stephanie, because, you know, we are losing the ability to connect with one another, in particularly today. Well, protocol helps you bring that right back. Protocol actually gives you the advantage. It puts you in a stronger position to seal the deal with a negotiation with a client, in creating a stronger relationship with a person you've just met. All the tools that I outline in the book help you raise your game and pivot your power.
Well, we're going to all I could definitely use some protocol tips myself. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the incredible programs that you worked so hard with Secretary Clinton to implement during your time at the State Department. One in particular called Experience America, that you and Secretary Clinton created really for the diplomatic corps. So I'd love to hear, again, your thoughts and why you thought it was important to create this program, and then maybe you can talk about some of the trips and share the one that was the most fabulous of all.
Well, Secretary Clinton hosted every week an assistant secretary's meeting. And early on in the administration, when she called us together, she directed us to go back to our offices, sit with our staff, and come up with new ways that we can strengthen the relationships of the United States and our world partners. And I did just that. I sat with my team and we thought long and hard what we could do. And we came up with a new division called the Diplomatic Partnerships Division, whereby we intended to strengthen our relationships with the Foreign Diplomatic Corps, the best of the representatives sent to our country to represent their countries. And within that wonderful division, we had several programs. One of those programs was Experience America, which was launched previously by my predecessor, Ambassador Nancy Brinker. We took it and we drew on it even more. We made it larger, we made it stronger. And one of my favorite trips, this program was intended to take the ambassadors outside of Washington, D.C., so that they could see just how extraordinary the United States is, how diverse our people are, and hopefully introduce them to make some new connections that they could bring back to their countries. And one of my favorite trips was to Alaska. Now, if you haven't gone to Alaska, you have to go. It's an amazing place in our great country. When the ambassadors arrived, they were just thrilled to be there. But one special aspect of the trip was a train ride from Glacier Bay back to Anchorage. And as we watched the glaciers, which won't be here for much longer, pass by us, the ambassador of Chile grabbed a guitar and started to play. And as his backup singers, it was the ambassador of Peru, ambassador of Japan, the ambassador of Croatia. Couldn't be a more diverse group. The ambassador of Ireland, I think, as well. And they started to sing, myself included, I can't get no satisfaction. Nothing brings people together better than the Stones. And I do have to admit, there might have been a few bottles of wine that night.
Well, I'm pleased that you mentioned Alaska, because I remember hearing you talk about how fabulous that was. But I seem to remember another trip, another Experience America event. I remember you saying you saved the best till last.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness gracious. No, I just wanted to say one of the most interesting was to Alaska. The best Experience America trip clearly was to Arkansas, to Little Rock, Arkansas. And actually, I'm going to tell you that it really was because...
And to Northwest Arkansas. It was a twofer.
It was a twofer. That's exactly right. And the reason being, it was because it had the combination of everything that we had done everywhere else. We had the opportunity to have a private audience with President Clinton, and for him to explain, our democracy and what this engagement was all about, and while during his time and as president, what he attempted to do to move our relationships closer together. That was extraordinary. They were just completely agog over that, which happened, of course, at the library in your beautiful, beautiful hall. But in addition to that, we learned about the Little Rock Nine. We went and we visited with them. They had a connectivity with them to learn about not only the best things about America, but also that there is sort of a darker belly. And we wanted to learn a little bit about that and explain to them why this history we still hold dear, and that we're still trying to move, as we well know today, those relationships forward. And then, as you point out, we went up and we saw the beautiful, extraordinary Crystal Bridges. If you have not been there, you must go. You absolutely must go. It is breathtaking. And I was so proud again to showcase this exquisite gem here in our country to all of these foreign diplomats who had traveled. And they all said they would return, and many, many of them have.
And I'm sure that you and the ambassadors will never forget standing in the middle of Razorback Stadium on the 50-yard line, learning how to call the hogs. That was...
Oh, that's right. That was so much fun. And I think they really loved
I don't have the video for tonight's program, but I'm sure I could send it around if necessary. Let's talk a little bit about some of the diplomatic tools. Secretary Clinton really had an array of diplomatic tools, I think, in her toolbox. And one such tool that she spoke of frequently as Secretary of State was the concept of smart power. Can you explain what smart power is and how it is used effectively in conducting U.S. diplomacy?
Sure, yes. So Secretary Clinton is smart power. Let me just tell you that. She was one of the finest tools in diplomacy that President Clinton has while she was First Lady, and certainly as our top diplomat in the Obama administration as well. She understood the power of bringing together soft power tools, things like food diplomacy and gifting, the importances of those, and also our hard power tools, and you integrate them and you make them very effective so that when you go into those negotiations, you're trying to build an understanding with the person who is sitting across from you at that bilateral table. A fine example of how she utilized that was the people-to-people exchanges that we had with countries all over the world, but in particularly those partners that we were having some tough discussions with, like India and China in particularly. She used the people-to-people negotiations, or effectively, she enriched those discussions and those collaborations because she knew that if we understood one another, if we were able to welcome students and people from China and able to send students and people from China, from the United States, that our connectivity, our bridges of understanding would grow, and that perhaps the gaps of misunderstanding would lessen and that there would be collaborations. She used this time and again, and it certainly did come into play on many tough discussions and occasions, in particularly when she had to solve a crisis with one blind dissident when she traveled to China.
Capricia, in your book, you speak so fondly of Secretary Clinton and her positive mentorship. Can you tell us what you think? I'm sure there are so many lessons, but is there one that sticks out in your mind as really the most valuable lesson that you learned from her?
It actually, I'm blessed to have had a mentor invest in me in the early phases of my career and then stay with me throughout. Every time there was an opportunity, she was the hand that reached down and pulled me up. You want a mentor who is sitting on that branch several above you because they have a clearer view of the opportunities and some of the pitfalls that you can make your way to, and they help you avoid those, or they offer those opportunities to you. They give you their resources. You want to find a mentor who just really wants to invest in you, who will give you good judgment without being judgmental. And she was all of that. I do remember right at the very beginning when I was working for her in the governor's mansion during the transition time, and she had called.
Basement babes.
We were the basement babes. That's right, dear. She called me to the kitchen, and I think we were making one of her favorite sandwiches, mustard and turkey back then, on whole wheat. Mm-hmm. And we sat down on the stools, and we were just talking about the day. And then she turned to me and she said, "Well, Capricia, what do you think you're going to want to do after we end this phase?" And I really didn't believe I was going to have a job or position. And I said, "Well, I was thinking I'd just go back to Cleveland." And she's like, "Capricia, you need to plant yourself where you can grow." I said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Hillary." And she said, "Well, you need to plant yourself where you can grow. You need to know what you're capable of doing. You need to believe in yourself, and then you need to go for it." And I took that to heart. And then she said, "And to help you do that, I want you to come to Washington, D.C. with me, and I'm going to give you a job in the White House." I was agog. I was like, oh my goodness. Yes and yes. I immediately called my husband that I had been married to for about 2 minutes, and I told him, guess what? We're moving from Cleveland to Washington, D.C. And so he found his internship there after he graduated from medical school, and the rest was history.
The rest and history keeps unfolding for sure. In addition, as chief of protocol, you also had an opportunity to really be around Mrs. Obama quite frequently, and you talk about what an incredible lady she is. Are there any specific lessons or anything you'd like to share from your time with Mrs. Obama?
Oh, well, she is a great studier of everything. She likes full briefings. She wants to make sure that she is completely, fully prepared because she understood the importance of not deviating away from the president's agenda, but being able to support it in everything that she did. So before any of our foreign trips, I was really, I was pleased to see that she welcomed all of the advice that I gave her. She would ask again and again a variety of questions. Some I had the answers to, some I didn't, and I would make sure that I would report back into her. But I have to say that one day that I was probably the proudest of her was at Hillary's convention when she stood on that stage and she said to all of us,
Yes.
when they go low, we go high. And we, boy, need that right now. We all need to take that step high.
I want to talk a little bit about your final chapter in your book, which is called Negotiating While Female, where you make the claim that women are almost constantly in a state of negotiation for equality. Can you elaborate on that and give us a quick overview of how to combat it?
Well, you know, I present the book and with all the tools and lessons as they can apply to anyone, but we are women. And we know that this is a male-dominated world that we live in. And so we have to sometimes skew those tools a bit more in our favor. So that's why I inserted this last chapter. And some of the tools that I learned, I of course learned from my mentor and my colleagues, my female colleagues, and I wanted to share them with other women. The one big one is if you are not being heard in a meeting. This was one that actually Hillary shared with us at a scheduling meeting because we were complaining. You know, the White House was diverse, but there still were a lot more guys sometimes in those meetings. Yeah. And when you spoke up, for some reason it seemed like they just didn't hear us. And we would come back and say, boy, oh boy, it's hard to get a point of view across. And she said, well, when you're sitting there, and if Stephanie's across the table from you, and Stephanie has a great idea and doesn't seem like anybody heard it, you chime in and say, hey, Stephanie, that was a great idea. Can you repeat it for everyone? And then Stephanie would repeat. And I said, wow, did everybody hear what Stephanie said? Stephanie's great idea. And you repeat it again so that it's really heard. And it worked. It worked again and again. And you should find a place that has great support systems for you. You know, we were of an age when we were getting pregnant and having babies. And that White House, boy, there were a lot of babies there. Hillary popped up Chelsea's crib for me on the 3rd floor. And she would send broccoli over to my office when I was pregnant to make sure that I was getting enough folic acid, and then celebrate with a beautiful baby shower for all of us, everyone who was having a baby. I mean, again and again, it was just such a welcoming, inviting atmosphere. And they knew that we wanted to come back to work. They knew that we wanted to have our children and our families, but we wanted to come back to the office and to finish our time there. And she just really made that possible by creating those support systems. But I also would advise women, you know, don't fight being the moderator in a discussion. It's important that if you're invited to go on a panel, and you may be the woman who is chosen to be the moderator, it's an important position. You control the conversation. So take that, but don't let them get away with having manels, as I call them. Fight to have women on every one of those panels so that their voices are heard. When there is diversity in the discussion, better decisions are made. We all know that.
We do all know that. And as President Clinton says as well, all the time, diverse groups make better decisions. So I know that I feel it's those of us who've been given these wonderful, extraordinary opportunities, going back to your mentoring comment, it's also our responsibility to do just what Hillary Clinton did for you, just what Alexis Herman and Evelyn Lieberman and Maggie Williams and all those wonderful women that really took us young women under their sleeves really, and helped us work through so many challenges and difficult days. And so I know, and I've watched you for years do that for so many other young women. So it's really, really important.
We've paid it forward, Stephanie. We've all paid it forward.
That's right. That is right. Well, we're now going to turn to some questions that we received from the audience. As I mentioned, we had over 365 people joining tonight and have dozens and dozens of questions, which clearly I'm not going to have a chance to ask all of them, but I am going to choose a couple. And I'm going to do a little name calling too. The first question came in from someone you all know named Betty Curry. Betty Curry. So she's asking you, Capricia, what was your motivation, your objective, which allowed you to fully assume your functions during all these years? How did you manage your family life and your professional life? Whenever you encounter a difficulty, how do you manage to find the strength to continue and not give up?
Oh my goodness. Well, Betty Curry, I just want to send you a big hug and kiss. Betty was just one of those special people in the White House who, on behalf of the president, had that beautiful smile when she welcomed guests to the Oval Office. And she just made every moment of our lives just really wonderful with all of her stories and also with just her warm embrace. She was just a wonderful, wonderful person. So big hugs to you, Betty. Balancing work life, it's never easy for anyone. And Stephanie, you are the greatest example of it. I have to say, you really, really are. You have your objectives of what you want to do in your career, and then you also are a mother and of course a wife, and you make all of that work for yourself. But if you have a great partner, you and I were both very lucky to have men in our lives who were great partners and helped us, stayed with us, and supported us throughout every one of those decisions that we made.
In the village, it takes a village. Somebody said that one time, and the village of women we just discussed in the White House, in our daily lives. So important to surround yourself and let other people help you and take care of you. And again, you're the master of surrounding yourself with incredible helpers in a village. So thank you, Betty, for sharing that. Now I'm going to go to a question from someone you know who I think has obviously helped you quite a bit on your book too. My friend John Keller, who works here at the Clinton Library from the National Archives. John is asking, were you able to receive any training or advice from your predecessor, Ambassador Mary Mel French, who previously held the post of Chief of Protocol during the Clinton administration? And I think Ambassador French may be on the program tonight with us as well, tuning in.
Oh, hello, Mel. Oh, it's wonderful. Well, I was very lucky to have predecessors in both of my positions. Ann Stock, before I became social secretary, was wonderful. She taught me everything, all of the tricks of the trade before I took on the post, and was just an amazing predecessor, as was both Molly Razor and Mel French. Both of them really were such dignified chiefs of protocol and represented our country so very well in that posting. I am very lucky to have been a part of two groups of people, both the social secretaries and chiefs of protocol, who pass down their information, who share their best practices with one another, so that we have a continuity of service to government and service to the president and the first lady and everything that we do. And so, yes, I first watched both Molly and Mel when I was social secretary, and later on when I became chief of protocol, I sat down with them. They were wonderful about sharing every tidbit that they had with me so that I could be as successful as I possibly could be for President and Mrs. Obama.
And what an amazing team you built in your office of protocol with Lise Satterfield and the incredible Dennis Chang and our dearly departed friend Grace Garcia, who, oh my gosh, talk about what an inspirational woman who did so much for so many. But she goes to you for building such a diverse and fabulous team. And we are only as strong as the people we surround ourselves with.
That is so true, Stephanie. That is ever so true. And we were also very lucky to have hardworking, ambitious young women as well. I know Allie Rubin might be on this call as well. And boy, oh boy, she kept our office in lockstep, along with so many others.
But lockstep, I know.
Sorry?
She still keeps you in lockstep, even though she doesn't officially work for you.
This is so true. This is so true. But I want to say that in addition to the political appointees who came with the president and the first lady, there are so many career officers and foreign service career officers who are foreign service and civil service. They dedicate their lives to service at the State Department and in the White House, making sure that they attend to every detail, but pass down as well their years of knowledge and knowing when things go right and when things go wrong. They can give you the best guiding advice.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a perfect segue to our next question, which is from Claire Mitchell, who is an alumni affairs specialist here in Little Rock at the University of Arkansas. She wanted to know what advice you may have for someone wanting to begin a career in diplomacy or foreign service.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I would say that interning in the government, in particularly at the State Department, would serve you very, very well. First off, as an intern, you are delegated a lot of duty. There are not many hands there, and so they give you great responsibility. You will not be making copies and serving coffee. You really will be working on policy, research, and learning a great deal from those who you serve. So I would advise to take that preliminary step. You never know, it could lead to hiring in a post of a GS level, probably 9 or so.
Right. Sheila Bronfman, someone you know well, the Marshal, the Grand Marshal of the Arkansas Travelers, wanted to know, do you think that the State Department in the current administration is using diplomacy in any effective way?
Oh, wow.
Thanks. No, seriously, like talk about a little bit about, I think that's really important because talk a little bit about transitioning from one administration to the next. So talk a little bit about the current administration and your views on the tools of diplomacy and how they're being utilized or not utilized.
Sure. When you take on the office of the presidency, you are given the responsibility to lead our country in a manner that creates collaborations, that carries the mantle of service so that others can follow in your stead, in your path. Successful presidents have looked to the tools that have been presented to them, and diplomacy certainly is one of them. It's a very strong tool. It's a very powerful tool when it is executed appropriately. And I had the privilege of working for 2 extraordinary presidents and 2 extraordinary secretaries of state who understood the power of diplomacy and utilized it so that our country was in dire times, in times of crisis, they used it quite effectively to move the needle so that not only would we emerge successfully, but that we also were strengthened by it. They surrounded themselves with great advisors. I want to say that I was perhaps included amongst them, and took their advice because they knew that that advice was well-founded in reason that would help them move along those diplomatic engagements.
This next question I think is really interesting, and it's from Sharon Douglas, who serves as the CEO for the Anne Frank Center for Mutual Respect. Sharon wants to know, how can we include tools of diplomacy in educating school children to become better allies rather than bystanders?
Oh, what a great question. I believe long and hard in investing in our children's education in all aspects. And we can do that today, and particularly when they're stuck at home, sheltering in place with us. With my son, he was only 9 years old when I took up the position of chief of protocol. And I made sure that he understood why this job was important and exactly what this job did. I brought him with me to national days at various embassies. And as we would cross the threshold of the embassy, I would say, now, Cole, you are in France. Or now, Cole, you are in China. Or now, Cole, you are in Afghanistan. Wherever we were visiting and whichever embassy we were at, I wanted to make him understand that special experience. And then once we were in, how unique the culture was, how different it was, and the importance of proper etiquette. I like to reinforce it. People think that is that they are just sort of fuddy-duddy things of the past that maybe grandma carried. Sorry?
I said we're stuffy, but they're really not.
No, you're absolutely right. They are not. It's a way of conducting your behavior appropriately in public. And it's a guideline for young people so that when they are seated at a meal, that they feel comfortable in the conversation that they're having because they know which is the proper utensil to use, where my bread plate is. All of the mystery goes away and certainty takes its place so that they can then deal with the engagement at hand. And I wanted that for my son as well. And so I think it's super important for us to pass down these lessons to our children so that they grow up in an atmosphere, in a life that has a lot more certainty surrounding it. It provides them their protocol foundation.
That's right. Another interesting question from Monica Scott. She talks about the recent pandemic and how many of us have been catapulted into a new virtual workplace, which comes with new unwritten protocols, making conversational turn-taking and business discussions somewhat cumbersome and sometimes awkward, like when we had a little technical difficulty a few minutes ago. Do you have any recommendations or protocols for the virtual workplace?
Oh, I absolutely do. I've been thinking long and hard about this, and I was thinking maybe there's a second book there now. Well, as I said, protocol helps to diminish the uncertainty. It provides the proper roadmap for you so that you avoid those pitfalls. And right now, everyone feels like they're sort of traveling in a fog. And we want to know, what are the new rules for today? How should I be behaving in my work life and in my personal life for these virtual engagements like the one that we are having? First and foremost, I say, make sure that you show up on time. That means that you have to think about, when you would travel to a meeting, you would park your car, you take the elevator. Well, just give yourself enough time. You want to make sure that your technology works, test that tech so that it is functioning when you have to click on the camera. But before you click on the camera, do some research about the person you're meeting with. Make sure that you know who that person is, because we are really meeting up close and personal. When you go into a meeting in a room, you have the space of the room that sort of some of this. Right now, everything is really up close and personal. So also attend to what your background is. As you can see, I've attended to mine, as you have, my dear. I love yours, the image of the library.
Right.
So make sure that you're thinking about your entire surrounding, and then also how are you presenting yourself to that person. All of these tips will help you advance your advantage while you're meeting in the virtual world.
Well, Capricia, we're coming close to the end of our time for this evening. But for all of you, before I ask Capricia our final question for the evening, I want to encourage you to all go pre-purchase this incredible book. And you can pre-order it online by going to clintonmuseumstore.org and typing protocol in the top right-hand search bar. And not only will you be helping our fabulous friend Capricia make that all-important New York Times bestseller list, but by purchasing your book through the Clinton Museum Store, you are helping support the Clinton Center's important work, like the COVID meals program that you heard Secretary Clinton talking about at the beginning of our program. And we hope to be able to continue this while this pandemic persists throughout our country. So again, please consider purchasing a book. Let's help Capricia. But again, you will also be supporting the work that we're doing here in Little Rock, helping our neighbors and all of the work that the Clinton Foundation does throughout the year. Again, it's clintonmuseumstore.org. Now, Capricia, to conclude each one of our Bridge Builders programs, we ask our speaker to offer a call to action, really a charge to every person in attendance to learn more or do something that adds to the bridge that together we are all building to the future. So, Ambassador Marshall, what is your call to action as we conclude our program this evening?
Well, my call to action would be to support the endeavors of the Clinton Foundation, because I believe in the tenets that the Clinton Foundation sets forth. Just this program that you were just discussing, Stephanie, ever so important for those who have to help those who don't. In particularly now, families are missing loved ones. Families are hurt by some of the injustices that still exist in our lives. And through the support that you have given to so many families in a way that we can come and support you will help change the lives of so many more.
Well, thank you. Capricia, you, your life and your career, you are the epitome of a true bridge builder. So thank you for giving us insight into your fascinating world and your career, for sharing practical advice on how we can all apply your lessons to our everyday lives. And a very special thank you to President Clinton and to Secretary Clinton for kicking off tonight's conversation. And finally, on behalf of all of my colleagues here at the Clinton Foundation and those who are tuning in, I want to thank everyone who has joined in tonight, all of you. You're so important to us and to us being able to continue our work. We hope you enjoyed this special conversation with Capricia tonight, and I hope you'll stay tuned for an announcement on our next Bridge Builders program on July 9th. Mark your calendars. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Stephanie.
Good night. Thank you.